Good afternoon, good morning, and of course, Happy New Year, America. We made it to 2018, and what a ride it has been. I'm Dick Farrell for America Talks Live and for Brett Winterbill today. Glad you could be along for the ride. Even more important, I'm glad I'm along for the ride, having spent my first New Year's in bed before 9:30 in 50 years. But the fireworks woke me up at midnight anyway. Well, it's the way it goes. At least it was warm where I am. I'm in South Florida. Much of the country freezing. And I mean deep freeze. And you know, it's that deep freeze that's going on across America now that gave birth to the term climate change. Originally, they started with global cooling. That didn't work out in the 70s for them too well because according to those predictions, they were telling us, all those pointy-headed people, they were telling us we would be in an ice age by now. Well, now they went presto changeo. It's global warming. So global warming carried on for a few years, and then came climate change because it was always cold when they were complaining about global warming. So now climate change, which basically means the weather changes, which it does, time to time, year to year, day to day, week to week, the weather always changes. So what are they complaining about? I'm with our president, folks. It's crazy to complain about the weather because there's nothing we can do about it. We're going to do a lot of different things today. We're going to visit a lot of different places. There are some tragedies. I hate to have this threatening to crack down on them big time. There's a lot of aggravation in the British Isles during New Year's. We'll take a look at some of the things that they didn't like what they were doing. Plus, our president has been tweeting quite a bit. Got to go through some of those. The cold weather. The Air Force is planning to create a flying aircraft carrier. Well, wonders never cease. And CNN, you've always wondered about CNN, haven't you? Why do they say and do the things they do? Well, maybe they've been engaging in the use of controlled substances. We have them on tape lighting up a bong and a joint last night in Times Square. Jodie Foster is ripping the movies. Jodie Foster says the superhero films are no good. We'll explain why, if we have time. I kind of think that's kind of like real back burner stuff. But here's a 55-year-old actress who just keeps hammering away and saying dumber things each day. But let's get to the president and his tweets. I love President when he tweets. No other president has tweeted as much as this president, and it's a good thing. He says we're just getting started in 2018. What a year it has been, and we're getting started together, making America great again. Happy New Year, he adds, that our country rapidly grows stronger, smarter, and I want to wish all of my friends, supporters, enemies, haters, and even the very dishonest fake news media a happy and healthy New Year. 2018 will be great for America. The president also said he will head back to D.C. today. He's leaving Florida for D.C. around 4 p.m. Eastern. Much of work will be done this year, he says, and he's looking forward to 2018 during his party at his Florida resort yesterday. We have some video of what the party at Mar-a-Lago, just a few miles from where we are, looked like. Let's roll tape on the Trump New Year's Eve party.
Happy New Year, everybody. I think you're going to go in and take some pictures of the crowd. Great crowd. We're going to have a great year. It's going to be a fantastic 2018. We're off to a very good start, as you know, with the great tax cuts and Anwar and getting rid of the individual mandate, which was very, very unpopular, as you know. But we are going to have a tremendous year. The stock market, I think, is going to continue to go up. Companies are going to continue to come into the country, and they're doing it now, soon to be a record clip. So we look forward to seeing you inside. Come on along.
Come on along. Yes, Mr. Trump, a man who grew up a mile and a half from where I did. He looks great in that tuxedo. His hair's trimmed neatly. And I got to tell you, I would say he looks like $1 million, but I'd be insulting him. He looks like a few trillion bucks, if you ask me. The president, meanwhile, talking about the anti-government protests going on in Iran. State media reports that at least 12 people have been killed. Hundreds have been arrested. Thousands have been wounded, and some protesters tried to take some military bases, but were stopped by security. The protests began last week over economic issues. President Trump says he supports the anti-government protests in Iran, and he tweeted that Iran is failing at every level despite the terrible deal made with them by the previous administration. The great Iranian people have been repressed for many years. They are hungry for food and freedom along with human rights. The wealth of Iran is being looted. Time for a change. Yeah, time to make Iran great again. This comes after he tweeted that the big protests in Iran, people are finally getting wise to how their money and wealth is being squandered. Looks like they will not take it any longer, says he. The USA is watching closely for human rights violations. President Trump says also it's time to cut aid to Pakistan. You may have heard in our newscast at a few minutes before the hour. Trump tweeted the U.S. has given the country more than $30 billion in aid over the last 15 years and have given the U.S. return nothing. This comes after the administration announced last week that we will be withholding nearly $250 million until their government takes more decisive action against terrorists. Well, by the way, we welcome your phone calls, and it's easy to do if you want to talk to me about any subject we bring up or something you think is worthy of being on television. Our number is 1-877-NEWSMAX. Very simple, 1-877-NEWSMAX. If you have trouble with those letters, it's 1-877-639-7629. We'd like to talk to you. In fact, all of us here would like to talk to you. I'll be the one doing the talking, but it's always pleasant to say we. You ever notice how a lot of media folks always say we when they're talking about an I? I hate that. I also hate when people say ring in the new year. We'll get to that later. That is really one of the ones that drive me up a wall, but we'll talk about it later. It's got a little video in that for you, too. South Korea on Monday welcomed the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and his offer to send a delegation to the I think it's pronounced Pyeongchang Games, and to hold talks with South Korean leaders to improve relations. This is amazing. A spokesman for the South Korean presidential office added that the South hopes the two Koreas will sit down for talks and find peaceful resolution to the tension on the Korean peninsula. Kim said Monday he had warned the U.S., though, that he has his finger on the nuclear button, and he's ready to use it if North Korea is threatened. And he was open to dialogue, though, with Seoul and may send a North Korean delegation to the Games as part of an effort to lower military tension. Tensions have been rising on the border with North Korea, using their missile programs, and Pyongyang continues to pursue the defiance of the UN Security Council resolution with bellicose rhetoric coming from both the isolated state and the White House. Ugly situation in Korea. It's been going on since 1950. It has never been good. There's always been the danger. It's a hot-button place that could cause a world war at any moment, especially now that North Korea has these nuclear weapons and threatens to actually use them. Anyway, bitter cold gripping the Northeast as well as the Midwest. We ushered in the new year. The Rocky Mountain states, too. Record low temperatures making travel difficult. Residents found themselves among drifts reaching beyond window level in some houses. Many people either playing in the snow or cleaning it up through chest-high accumulations. I got to tell you, though, now this is all caused by global warming. You know that? You talk to the global warming, the warmongers of global warming. You talk to them. They'll tell you that the snow, ice, and cold is a cause of global warming, or it's caused by global warming. How ridiculous. How ridiculous. But really, think about it, though. That's when they went from global warming to global climate change, so that any weather extreme can no longer be used to defend against their remarks. Now they just simply say, well, that's climate change. Well, of course it's climate change. The weather changes. Where have you been? Large parts of the U.S. have been gripped by freezing weather with cold air stretching from Montana to Maine, expectations of temperatures below 10 degrees. According to the National Weather Service, Erie, Pennsylvania, two-day snowfall, 59-year-old record, caused a winter blast. The mercury in New York City at Times Square last night down to 9 degrees. It was the third coldest New Year's Eve on record. The coldest ever was 100 years ago, 110 years ago, 1907, when it was 7 below. Cold weather. And people stood out there in the icy cold to bring in with a B, bring in the new year. There's a clue. Instead of ring, it could be bring. I think that's where it came from. Anyway, but mostly police report that it was tourists, not local residents. Well, I lived in New York for 2/3 of my life, and I've never been to Times Square on New Year's Eve, never wanting to endure the weather or the crowds, which were just amazingly huge. 1 million people stuffed into Times Square. But the NY is 9:30 in the morning when the New Year's Eve ball made its annual descent at midnight, undeterred and perhaps reassured by a massive police presence I just mentioned. Despite the grip of bitterly cold Arctic weather, the experience was made particularly memorable this year for hundreds of thousands of people who braved the bone-chilling weather. In the waning hours of 2017, the mercury had plunged below 10 degrees. AccuWeather made the city's second, they said it was the second coldest New Year's, but there's some debate about that. One man, his secret to staying warm, standing hours and hours in the icy cold, his secret, he was wearing a special adult diaper that was loaded with warm water. What do they think of next? Who knows? We'll find out. Coming back in our next segment, we have much to talk about. I want to get to that CNN lighting on camera marijuana. I guess they're celebrating the new law in California. California now allowing the free sale of marijuana. This is going to be just a wonderful experiment for us all to sit around and watch. We'll be delving into that as well. And remember the Amtrak train going off the tracks a couple of weeks ago in Washington State? Well, believe it or not, I thought at first when I read it that it was a rather strange story and that there are peculiar things that they're telling us about it. We'll find out in a moment or two just how peculiar they are, because it's getting stranger and stranger as the NTSB continues to investigate the crash in the state of Washington just a couple of weeks ago. And some of the other stuff, Chris Matthews is in the news this morning. He apparently is not a very easy fellow to work with over at CNN. We'll tell you what some people had to say. And isn't it strange that you have this uber liberal who believes in all of this peace, love, and freedom, is an arrogant SOB to his coworkers? Strange, but that's always been the truth with liberals. They love humanity. They love embracing masses. But when it comes to each individual, they find ways to be biased. We're back in just a jiffy. Don't go away. I'm Dick Farrell for America Talks Live on Newsmax TV. Welcome back, or welcome into America Talks Live. I'm Dick Farrell, in for Brett Winterbull. And if you want to join us in conversation, you can. We have a phone number, 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. We'll take your call. I promise. CNN caught on camera. In fact, not only caught on camera, but actually filming it themselves. You could say it's a kind of self-incrimination. We have a CNN reporter live on camera lighting up a bong, supposedly with marijuana inside. Whether or not we have a picture of Mr. Lemon doing that, do we? There we go. CNN reporter holding a joint, lights a bong for a pot smoker right on New Year's Eve in Times Square. And that's what they're proud of, a Rocky Mountain high. But you know what? That's not allowed in New York City, at least not yet. And if you ever wondered about CNN and how they do the things they do, why they do the things they do, this might give us a little window of understanding into the motivation behind their behavior. Anderson Cooper there with Andy Cohen lighting up a joint in Times Square. Well, it was pretty cold. You light up anything, I suppose. One of President Trump's former campaign advisors is on the loose. He said that the president should fire Robert Mueller. Roger Stone wrote in the Daily Caller that the president should also appoint a new special counsel to look into alleged abuses of power by Clinton, Obama, the FBI, and the NSA. But South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham has told us that Mueller should be keeping his job. Let's hear more about that.
This investigation will go forward. It will be an investigation conducted without political influence, and the president needs to focus on his day job.
Well, I always wondered about this fellow, George Papadopoulos. The Times reported that this fellow told the Australian diplomats that Russia has damaging information against Hillary. Papadopoulos pled guilty to lying to the FBI as part of the Mueller probe. And, well, you know, if we ever get to the bottom of this, think about this. Let me a little perspective here, a little bit of the benefit of my experience and age. 45 years ago, the election of 1972 was won by a sitting president, an overwhelming 49 states to 1. And that one state was Massachusetts. His name was Richard Nixon. Shortly after that election was completed, people began to wonder, did it have any relation to a bugging operation of a few burglars who broke into Democrat National Headquarters in June of that same year? The investigation and subsequent resignation of the president lasted a total of 2 years. 2 years from the time the burglars were arrested at the Watergate Hotel to the day that Richard Nixon resigned from office. 2 years. We are almost to that point in the so-called Russia investigation that seems to have no end. And it's funded by the American taxpayer without any limit to it. And in 18 months of this investigation so far has yielded exactly a donut, a, quote, nothing burger. We have gotten nothing from this investigation to prove or connect or even suggest that somehow some Russians, unnamed Russians, were somehow involved in making Americans vote for Donald Trump. We know that there wasn't any hacking of the actual election machinery. That didn't exist. So they're trying to tell us they had an investigation going on where Trump people ordered by Trump or his underlings to work with Russians to make Americans vote for him. Well, I got to tell you, folks, I'm one of the 62 million people convinced to vote for Trump by the Russians. They convinced me. 62 million people convinced by Russians to vote for Trump. What a waste of money, time, and expertise. And Lindsey Graham is right on the money. The president needs to focus on his day job, and Mueller needs to go find a real job.
This investigation will go forward.
Thank you, Senator Graham, who, by the way, Senator Graham was a big critic of the president during the campaign, you may or may not recall. We have a tragic story out of New Jersey this morning. New Jersey police have arrested a teenager who shot his parents, his sister, and a family friend in their Long Branch, New Jersey home. The 16-year-old boy allegedly killed them. Officers responded to a call before midnight where they found the victims. Apparently, he had used a semi-automatic rifle. Now, let me give you a little inside baseball here, as they call it. Semi-automatic means that a trigger must be pulled for each round that is fired. Whenever folks hear semi-automatic, it sounds like some kind of powerful, disastrous weapon that's used for mass slaughter. No, semi-automatic means one pull of the trigger, one round comes out of the muzzle. Don't tell me you don't know what a muzzle is. Anyway, the youth was arrested. The gun apparently registered to someone at the residence, probably the father. Gun control complainers are going to raise a lot of snootiness about how the gun was at fault. Don't you find it peculiar that they blame guns for every time there's a shooting? And yet, in other countries where there are no guns, how can they blame the guns that don't exist on the shootings? Good question. Well, Colorado authorities have identified Matthew Reel as a suspect in yesterday's deadly shooting outside of Denver. Reel reportedly posted a video on YouTube where he railed against some of the officers in a very personal and profane way. The 37-year-old was found dead along with another deputy, 4 others also injured. Again, look for the gun to get blamed on that. The gun's going to be blamed on that. Every time a person with a gun commits a crime, every gun owner is blamed for it. Do you realize that? Does that sound illogical to you? I mean, if the gun owners were the problem, let me give you an idea of what kind of problem they would be. They have more than 1 trillion rounds of ammo. There are 89 million gun owners. Most of them own more than one gun. If they were the problem, you would know it. The Pope has spoken out, apparently. The Pope is telling us he's praying for the world to have peace in 2018. Another religious leader, the Iranian president, is calling for calm amid protests in his country. Ringo Starr and B.G. Barry Gibb have been tapped as British knights. Good luck to them. And do we have that clip of the 50 most prominent conservatives for 2017? I didn't even think there were 50. Well, the revelers around the world had a good time. There was some negative violence in Great Britain. Some people sometimes think that going out on New Year's Eve means it's time to commit activities that are antisocial. We saw a lot of that, according to the British press. There was a lot going on there yesterday. Pickpockets, robberies, muggings. It just seems to never end. But we had a more peaceful New Year's on this side of the big pond, which we should be thankful for. Most of the time we do that. But if you did a little perusal of some of the hospital emergency rooms, you would discover that New Year's wasn't all that peaceful. But we have to thank our first responders who remain on duty, even on New Year's Eve, in the face of these potential disasters. We have a clip of Jodie Foster is speaking out today, complaining about superheroes. She doesn't like the superhero movies. She says they are the reason that people do violent things. Come on, now give me a break. She's been in so many violent movies herself. They don't reflect on people doing nasty things, do they? She doesn't inspire. Her movies don't inspire people to commit crime, do they? But the superhero movies do. The movies that make youngsters want to be like, Superman and all those others. She says it's ruining viewing habits, slamming superhero movies as cinematic equivalent of fracking. Well, let me tell you, fracking is a wonderful thing. It has brought U.S. oil production to record high levels, and that's why you pay as little as you do for gasoline. When adjusted for inflation, gasoline is relatively cheap. We're back in a jiffy. Don't go away. This is America Talks Live. I'm Dick Farrell. Good afternoon in the East, good morning in the West, and of course, Happy New Year to all. My name is Dick Farrell, in for America Talks Live, and you can talk live if you'd like, 1-877-NEWSMAX or 1-877-639-7629. If you've got something to say, this is a good place to say it. Not only will I listen, but a whole bunch of people will hear you. And we could talk about things that we've been mentioning on the camera. You can talk about that or bring up something you have on your own mind. In the meanwhile, Hollywood has always been known to use their platform for political change. You may or may not recall years and years ago, Jane Fonda's movie about the China syndrome, that we were able to dig a hole in the earth from the United States and go to China and destroy the earth that way. You might remember there was a very famous actress who did a movie about the poisoning of the water somewhere, and it drove people crazy, and they wanted to stop this chemical company, which, of course, none of it was true. Well, people catch on very quickly. Al Gore and the Hollywood industry of message anymore. It turns out that climate change in 2017, a gaggle of films either name-checked Al Gore's biggest fear or built their own narratives around it. The timing and the theory couldn't be better for Hollywood, though. 3 hurricanes, massive fires in the West, record-setting chills, media reported routinely connected to disasters with global warming. But, of course, global warming doesn't really exist. It started as global cooling in the 1970s. When that didn't work, presto changeo, global warming came along. And now, when it's icy cold in New York City on New Year's Day, oh, it must be global climate change. Yes, climate change. Just to show you what a farce it really is. And it is. BuzzFeed. I love it when we uncover anti-white racism, because most liberals think there's no such thing. But there is. There is anti-white racism. BuzzFeed out today listing 37 things that white people have ruined. Can you just imagine if the cover of, let's say, Newsmax had listed 37 things that black people have ruined? Could you imagine the hailstorm of criticism all over the world? Well, once again, it's okay to be anti-white. It's okay to criticize white people. They are a legitimate minority to be hacked away at whenever the liberal feel-gooders think it's time to do so. And here's an example of it. TheBlaze.com has the whole story right there. Media BuzzFeed says white people are the ones ruining things. And that, by the way, came right out of the mouth of Michelle Obama, too. Coming back, we have a whole lot more to tell you about. Don't go away, including don't count calories, count the time. That's how you lose weight. Hi, I'm Dick Farrell. Glad you could join us. I'm even more glad that I could join you. But if you want to reach out to me, I'm available on Twitter at Talk Radio King on Twitter, and at Facebook, Dick Farrell, 2 words, F-A-R-R-E, 1 L. Everybody makes that mistake all the time with 2 L's. Wherever I go, I have to learn to live with it, but not on Facebook. It has to be correct, F-A-R-R-E-L. Please feel free to drop us a line, as they say. We have a caller? Okay. Let's get a caller on. This is Ken in Illinois. Happy New Year, Ken. Glad you could join us.
Happy New Year to you too, Dick. Hey, you know, Michelle Obama, she's going on about white people. And, well, you know, she's not all black.
Really?
Just like her husband. He's only about 48% black in that. So she's given down the line to her family heritage. And do you know that over 80%, maybe even as much as 90% of the black people in the United States and that are about 50% or less black?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of racial mixing that has gone on over the centuries that do, in fact, you know, that thing you see on television quite often, you know, look up your ancestry. A lot of people are finding out, hey, I've got white relatives. Hey, Ken, thanks a lot. Glad you were here, and a happy and healthy New Year to you and your family, even in the icy cold of Illinois, where I understand it is bitter. We have some great scenes from 2017 taken by drones, the top drone photos of the year. Let's get a look at a few of them here. They picked out pictures of a polar bear in Arctic Canada and a sweeping waterfall in Iceland. Window washers hanging off a Moscow skyscraper. We got that one coming up. Yeah, you keep your eye on that. You'll see it in a minute or two. These are the top drone pictures of 2017. Really breathtaking pictures. And if you get a chance to see them, you'll understand why. Drones are becoming more and more prevalent. Man, they're getting cheaper too. Before you know it, the sky's going to be black with them all over. They'll be getting in the way of everything. Remember how kites used to be very popular? Well, drones are taking their place. Anyway, our good buddy Chris Matthews over at the CNN News Network, not a very happy person to work for, as I understand. An MSNBC host, excuse me, I made a mistake. He's at MSNBC, not CNN. He runs, apparently at times, openly derisive and brazenly sexist news operation that has led at least some staffers to describe themselves as victims of battered wife syndrome. According to 3 of his show's guests and 2 former producers who spoke exclusively to Daily Caller, Two former NBC producers independently alleged that Matthews would rate the looks of his female guests on a scale and said Matthews was so abusive that staff joked about being battered women. The interviews totally paint Matthews as a tyrant, liable to fly off the handle at the slightest mistake, and who was eager to objectify women and made inappropriate sexual comments and appear to be a matter, of course, of someone of his position. Let me comment on that. What you have here is an example of an I know what's best for you liberal, but I'm going to do what I want to do. Time and again, you'll hear Chris Matthews carry on and fulminate at his oral cavity about how wonderful he treats women and how they are deserving of respect, which is true. I'm not arguing with that. But his own personal behavior, apparently, according to very close employees at MSNBC, he's a fake, phony, fraud hypocrite. A guy who says one thing and does another. Apparently, Chris Matthews, I think he's in his early 70s now. I do think it's time for him to hang it up. Time to go. He has spent way too much time behind the camera and carrying on behind the scenes, being something he claims no one should ever be. Why haven't they fired him yet? That's my question. He should be thrown right out the door. All right, where are we going next? I think we have, I know. Have you ever heard of this before? A team that did not win a game all season? Let's hear it for the Cleveland Browns, ladies and gentlemen. 0-16 yesterday, losing their final season game by only 4 points. The Cleveland Browns lose to Pittsburgh 28-24 in what appears to be a perfect season. The NFL franchise became the first in 8 years to go down 0-16, and the last time that was done, the Lions were the ones to have done that when their record back in 2008. Hey, let's hear it for by the way, those aren't really the Cleveland Browns anyway. The real Cleveland Browns moved to Baltimore years ago and changed their name to the Baltimore Ravens. Did you ever know why they got the name Ravens? I bet you don't know this. I know this. I'll tell you why I got it. A famous poet wrote a poem called The Raven, and he lived and worked and died in Baltimore, even though he was from Boston. Maybe you know who he is? Edgar Allan Poe, whose birthday is coming up this month, and they no longer celebrate it by decorating his grave. We're back in a jiffy here on America Talks Live. We'll take more of your phone calls and a lot more to talk about, so don't go away from Newsmax TV. Welcome back. I'm Dick Farrell for America Talks Live. Glad you could be here. And going back to the Dolphins from my last segment, a man once found a genie bottle. He rubbed it. The genie comes out. Man asked the genie if he could have him build a bridge from Honolulu to San Francisco. The genie said it's not possible. You have to ask for something else. So then he asked for the Dolphins to have a winning season. The genie looks at him, scratches his head, then looks back and says, "Let me see the plans about that bridge again." All right. Playboy is going to shift out of the print media and concentrate on, quote, branding, calling it the world of Playboy. What's America going to do without their famous smut magazine? Now you won't have to say, I only read it because I like the articles. Hell, here's what I can tell you. Maybe Playboy's going the way of the Buffalo Nickel, but Newsmax.com is continuing to print a very successful magazine every month of the year. So if you don't have Playboy, you should have Newsmax. Get one. Get one for me. Hey, this is the time of year we want to lose weight. I'm always trying to lose weight, but we found out we don't want to count calories. We want to count time. Here's the trick. It has been discovered that if you separate your meals by enough hours, you don't have to worry about what you eat. How do you like that? That's right. If you starve yourself a little bit more between breakfast and, let's say, dinner, you don't have to worry about counting calories because your body's going to burn them. I've always believed in that, and I've always been doing that. So let's see how that works. All right. You know that ringing in the new year stuff? Where did they get that from? I thought it was bring in the new year, and they forgot about the B. But people say, bring in the new year. Now they say, ring in the new year. And yet there are no bells going off at midnight. In Times Square, the ball drops. I don't hear any bells. We may hear gunshots from time to time, but no bells. Once again, as Leonard Nimoy would say, as Mr. Spock, these humans are illogical. We're back with a closing note in just a moment. Don't go away. This is America Talks Live. I'm Dick Farrell. Glad you could be here on Newsmax TV today. Be right back.
From far beyond the galaxies, I've journeyed to this place to study the behavior patterns of the human race. And I find them highly illogical.
Yes, indeed. They are illogical, more so now than ever before. Hey, folks, I want to thank you for having spent some time with me these last couple of days. I had a pleasure doing some fill-in here at Newsmax TV. Hope to do it again. Hope you have a great year ahead. Looking forward to many good things happening this year. Stock market going over 28,000. Republicans winning more seats in the Senate and the House. And you being safe, warm, and comfortable. Have a great year. See you soon.